Welcome. You good people, hello and welcome to Life on Earth. As you know, on Life on Earth, Robert and Amy Nasir on the Ayn Rand Center UK channel. As you know, on Life on Earth, we usually open the show with a quote from the novelist philosopher Ayn Rand from her 1976 speech, Philosophy Who Needs It, presented at West Point. And that quote is, except we're not going to give that quote this week. This week, the whole channel, the Ayn Rand Center UK, is celebrating, not Ayn Rand, well, indirectly, but is celebrating Leonard Peikoff. It's Leonard Peikoff's birthday tomorrow. He's turning 88.
Excellent.
Coincidentally, it's my birthday the day after that.
Oh, you're not turning 88.
I'm not turning 88. I'm turning 58, which means Leonard only has 30 years on me. So in theory, I should be as smart as he was 30 years ago. There's a sad story, but we are going to replace Ayn Rand's 1976 quote that we usually use with Leonard Peikoff's 1976 quote. And what did Leonard Peikoff say in 1976 that's so noteworthy that we have quoted it before many times?
I think I know what you're talking about.
In 1976, as part of the Moral Foundations of Government discussion that he gave. This was part of the original objectivism lectures in 1976 that led to OPAR objectivism, the philosophy of Ayn Rand. Leonard Peikoff said the first duty of justice is to acknowledge and defend the good.
Mysterio.
And this is where the whole premise of Life on Earth, of this show and just about everything else I do, this is bedrock. The first duty of justice, acknowledge and defend the good. The whole point of 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir.
Yes.
With Amy Nasir.
The
whole point of everything I do is that values are primary.
Yes.
Your life is an end in itself, and you're not living just to not suffer. You're not living just to not die.
Or to avoid pain.
Living is more than just not dying. We are here to live. We are here to create. We are here to produce your life. Your life is an end in itself. And the first duty of justice is not to fight evil, although that matters. The first duty of justice is to acknowledge and defend the good. So let's get to the acknowledging. The Ayn Rand Center UK has spent all week talking about Leonard Peikoff, and we've got to get our digs in, by which I mean our praise in. I first encountered the works of Leonard Peikoff, me personally, reading the Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology. So this would be mid to late 80s. I rediscover Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead, which I had read in high school. Thought it was a great book, but it didn't have the impact it should have had, would eventually have. Reread it in my 20s, in the 80s. Like, oh my God, this is great. What else has she got? Pick up a copy of Atlas Shrugged and go from this is great to, oh my God, this is true, and start looking for other works by Ayn Rand. Pick up The Virtue of Selfishness. Like, this is really philosophical, almost like technical philosophy.
Yes.
Next move after that, well, if you want something more technical, what do? If you're like, I want to really validate this. I want to really know what parts of this are. Even back then, it's like, what parts of this are true? What are the good stuff that I can take out of this and apply to my philosophy?
Yeah.
Because it's not like there's a philosopher who got everything right. What has she got that's good? So I pick up a copy of, I've got it right here. Ayn Rand's Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology. And what's interesting, everything is interesting about the Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, in fact, we'll come back to this a couple times, is she gives her explanation originally published in The Objectivist. Each chapter is brilliant, but then suddenly, right in the middle, there's this essay called The Analytic-Synthetic Dichotomy. And it's not by Ayn Rand, it's by Leonard Peikoff.
Yes.
So if anybody asks me, and it comes up in these conversations, what was the thing that really convinced you that Ayn Rand was right? It was actually Leonard Peikoff's essay, The Analytic-Synthetic Dichotomy.
Yeah, what kind of concepts were you struggling with at the time that that essay helped you with?
Well, spoiler alert for what I'll mention later, but it essentially convinced me that the introduction to objectivist epistemology and not David Harriman's book, The Logical Leap, is the validation of induction.
Now that's something to write about, Robert. That sounds very interesting.
And so when I finally met Leonard Peikoff on July 9th, 1990, because he was good enough to date it, I had him sign the book.
Oh, let's see.
And initially his reaction was, I don't sign books that other people wrote. I don't sign Ayn Rand's books. And so I explained to him, well, I understand why you would do that, but it's your essay in this book that really drove it home to me that this isn't just good ideas that I can incorporate into my philosophy. This is somebody got philosophy right. Somebody got the whole thing right. Stands to reason, makes perfect sense, except growing up, philosophy was something where you picked and choose. You get little bits from this wise person over here and this smart person over there. So Leonard Peikoff accepted that explanation and was happy to sign the book, even dated it for me. Harry Binswanger, incidentally, also signed it because this was the expanded second edition, 1990. That was a big deal. And he had added, oh, it's really cool. He had added, if you're familiar with this, if you look at the back of the book, the epistemological and philosophical conversations Ayn Rand had during the writing of these chapters, during the writing of the book. And it's fun because in the book, in these conversations, all of the professors, and these were really smart people she was talking to, ask her these great questions about her epistemology, and then some broader questions about philosophy too, but most of it's about epistemology. And you see the professors, their names aren't reproduced. It's Professor E, Professor F, Professor A. And it's fun because if you're on the HBL, or even if you're not, because it's been released publicly, if you're on Harry Binswanger list, he has finally, after many, actually after 15, 20 years after this edition was published, finally said who was who. And I guess because the only people who would have protested or been concerned about it are no longer metaphysically in existence. So it's fun. We now know that Professor E, for example, is Leonard Peikoff. So as you read through these and the questions that he asked, you're like, I bet that's Leonard Peikoff. Now you know if you were right. Professor A, incidentally, was Harry Binswanger.
Oh, A and E. Vowel letters.
Yes. So good stuff. And again, this is where I first encountered Leonard Peikoff in a significant way. Of course, I eventually went on to read this one, The Ominous Parallels, The End of Freedom in America. This has been re-released and renamed, but this is, of course, the original version. In fact, the hardcover here, although I've got a couple of paperbacks as well. Read that book. And
yeah, I've got to say that is probably the most dramatic book I have ever read in objectivism. It is extremely powerful. For people, a lot of us were really sad that we lost John Ridpath recently.
And we go back and read the essays that he wrote about the founding of America, very inspirational. But it's easy to forget when you think of The Ominous Parallels, The End of Freedom in America, that there is a chapter in here where Leonard Peikoff talks about the founding of America, and it's extremely inspirational. Yes, so if you think it's all sad and negative and doom and gloom, it's really not. The book, if you haven't read it in a while, or if you've never read it, is worth a read for that reason, if no other. So yes, I got to meet Leonard Peikoff in 1990, again, on that date that he signed that at Conceptual Conferences. That was the year he was lecturing on the first 5 chapters of the book he hadn't released yet. So I got a pre-publication copy in a spiral binder of the first 5 chapters of this book, Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand. This is the book we celebrated at OCON. We celebrated OPAR at OCON this year, celebrated its 30th anniversary. And obviously a magnificent book. I don't need to tell you about that. Amy actually met Leonard Peikoff for the first time at a Ford Hall Forum.
Yes, one of his last, actually, maybe the last one. I'm not entirely sure, but he was talking about the dim hypothesis. So I was there in the audience when he was actually giving us the very first glimpse of his dim hypothesis. And I must tell you, it was very, very technical. But he presented it in a way that it was pretty well understood. But I got to meet him just briefly to sign something. I forget what it was, or just to say hello afterwards. And it was nice.
It's hard to remember everything you signed. I said we would do a bit of show and tell, and of course, I'm doing a bit of that. So I can't remember everything that everyone. I'm just trying to give you the good memories that are fun to review and that you can share with yours in the chat. Incidentally, since we are 10 minutes in, real quick, as part of the Ayn Rand Center UK YouTube channel, you can super chat. If you go into the chat on YouTube, ask us your questions, we'll try to engage them. But if you put in a super chat, put a couple dollars in it, that goes to the Ayn Rand Center UK, supports the activities of the Institute. And if there was ever a time to do that, this week is the time to do it, just in honor of Leonard Peikoff, who was a surprise guest. Oh my God, nobody expected it during his birthday last year. We're like, Leonard Peikoff's so great. What do we spend an hour and a half, 2 hours talking about? Leonard Peikoff is so great. And only at the end of this big Zoom call does Leonard Peikoff come on, having heard all of that, and spends time talking to us. We're like, this guy's retired. He's never going to talk to us again. And he did.
That's
so
great.
This year, there is no surprise. We know it's coming tomorrow. Lisa Van Dam's giving a fireside chat. So if there was ever a time to put in a super chat, support the Ayn Rand Center UK, this would be the time to do it. We would love to see your super chats on YouTube.
Great value. Did you guys know that, even just a few years ago, Ayn Rand Center UK didn't exist. Tal Stefani coming to the Ayn Rand Institute and putting together the Ayn Rand Campus app didn't exist. All this stuff all this didn't exist. But especially with Ayn Rand Center UK, so much content out there on YouTube and Clubhouse.
So we're not going to spend a lot of time on that, but also if you're not a member yet, if you're not a member of the Ayn Rand Center UK, you can join, send them a little money every month, get access to resources regular plebeian proletarians don't have access to, including Don Watkins' communications workshops and James Valiant's Saturday morning study groups, just amazing stuff. AynRandCenter.co.uk. Go there, sign up, become a member. I am. And don't you want to be like me? Yes, you do. So do it. Make that thing happen. So the radio show. We're talking 1990. I meet Leonard Peikoff. A couple of years after that, Amy meets Leonard Peikoff at the Ford Hall Forum, one of the last talks he gives. He starts doing a radio show.
The Leonard Peikoff show.
The Leonard Peikoff show. Actually, this is interesting because it was originally called, look at that, Philosophy, Who Needs It? And yes, I was ordering, look at these. These are, you kids might not know this. These are what are called cassette tapes. And these are cassette tapes from the original iteration, Philosophy, Who Needs It? But yes, later on it became, and there you go, the Leonard Peikoff show. What
I loved about it was that his intro music was a piano piece that I believe that he composed and played himself. I mean, that's just
very charming,
very, very sweet and charming and very happy intro music.
My history with Leonard Peikoff includes a lot of these cassette tapes. This one is Philosophy of Education.
Yes.
And I've got sadly, or maybe happily, I've still got them. Although who knows if I'll ever actually put them in a cassette player again, because amazingly, so much of this content is now available on the internet. And in fact, if you go to my Facebook wall after we get done here, you'll see that I've included links to some of the best of stuff that I recommend that used to be really, 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 how many reallys is that? Hard to get. It used to be really rare. And you would have to buy these tapes, or sometimes you'd have to rent them because they weren't available for sale yet. And now you can actually watch the entire 12 video playlist of Leonard Peikoff's original, The Philosophy of Objectivism from 1976, just by clicking the link I stuck in the show notes.
Amazing.
Amazing. That was one you couldn't buy. You could only rent it if you were part of a study group.
Can I just say one real quick thing about the Leonard Peikoff show?
Yes.
It's not really available. Not everything is available just out there. I know that there are a lot of podcasts that he did that are available online, but these are just so fun. Leonard Peikoff came out and he didn't have this extraordinarily resonant voice. And he decided to do a radio show, and you could see that he actually got better through time, and he would start his show, which was syndicated in I don't know how many states. It was actually pretty big there for a while. And he would say, this is Leonard Peikoff with my golden throated voice. It's just funny.
He did.
so
He expanded the
enjoyable.
show. Eventually, he was doing multiple hours. And I guess it got to be too much for his voice.
Yeah.
After a while, he had Yaron Brook on regularly handling the politics side because he didn't like talking about politics.
Right.
And then toward the end, he would have a guest host, Andrew Lewis, would
Yeah.
come on and take over some of the shows. And eventually, when he decided it was just too much, Andrew Lewis took over altogether. It became the Andrew Lewis Show. And they did that for a while as well. Very, very cool. There were three, in fact, on the radio show, there were three that I remember. I remember you, Amy, you sent a birthday card to Ayn Rand. You know, you might remember way back when electronic birthday cards were a thing. They still are, but they were a pretty big deal back then.
They were new and shiny.
Yeah, and companies like American Greetings were getting on board. And so Amy sends Ayn Rand a birthday card, care of the Leonard Peikoff Show. And he actually read it on the show, and he was delighted to see
it was
that.
Lovely.
And mentioned it right on the show. There was his review of the film Chocolat from 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And he was bowled over by the film, as our regular listeners know. Amy and I are as well. And we really appreciated his review of that film. It's a charming movie. It's a delightful film. Philosophically, what did he say? He would change maybe one or two lines of the movie and it would be philosophically flawless. And I heartily endorse his recommendation of that. And then finally, he did an episode. You know, he would do his tie-in contests and he would bring philosophy into the show. And he did an episode on heroes and invited people to call in and tell him their heroes who were heroic examples of heroism in their lives. And so we called in and described one of our greatest heroes, somebody who was inspiring, who was brave, who was brilliant. And we went through a lot of details where I really thought by the end, it should have been obvious who we were talking about. And Leonard says, well, I have to know, who is this person that you guys are talking about?
Yeah, we went on and said, you know, that this person has helped so many other people, you know, with really amazing, you know, wisdom and philosophy. And Leonard Peikoff, he finally just like laughed and said, wait, who are you talking about? And I think it was me who said, I was so honored. It's you who are talking about Leonard Peikoff. As a matter of fact, I listened to James Valiant actually did a program a day ago or so about Leonard Peikoff. And he actually did the same thing. He was in an audience of some kind of this, one of the speeches, and it was a Q&A
which tells me he was a little bowled over on the radio show, but it obviously wasn't the first time somebody said, you know, Dr. Peikoff, you're my hero. And that was great too. So lots of memories from the radio show and from the podcast. Speaking of the podcast, since you mentioned it, there's actually a book out there of the best of the podcast. And it's a big book. This might be everything from the podcast, keeping it real, bringing ideas down to earth. And it's yet another, because it's funny. And the reason why I've lined up all the books, even though I'm talking about my favorite ones, is when I think of books by Leonard Peikoff, well, there's three. We all know Leonard Peikoff wrote three books: The Ominous Parallels, Opar, and The Dim Hypothesis. And that I'm always thinking there's three books by Leonard Peikoff, but no, there's Understanding Objectivism. Well, wasn't that a lecture course? Yes, but it was compiled into a book. There's the Keeping It Real book.
Yeah, which covers everything from love and sex to human nature to parenting and children.
So many of the works that started out as lectures, like Understanding Objectivism, have become books. And it's fun. Even normally skeptical sources like Wikipedia's page list the bibliography, and it is as impressive as everything else about this guy. So fantastic.
You know, one of my favorite stories about Leonard Peikoff is that when he talked about quitting smoking, and he smoked and he ended up getting emphysema and a cough. And as soon as he found this out, he quit cold turkey. I think he carried around a packet of cigarettes with him from then on for a short while. But for the next 3 months, he just indulged in his favorite desserts, and he gained about 30 pounds and or 6 months or so. Like, anyway, he just found out about it, knew that it was bad for him, went cold turkey, gained some weight from eating sweets, including his favorite dessert, which is birthday cake. And then spent the next 6 months after that losing the weight that he gained. And anyway, I just love that. It's just so good.
There are some comments in the chat. We don't have any super chat yet. Don't know why. Normally by now we would have a bunch of money in the coffers for
Yes,
the
please
Ayn
give
Rand
us
Center UK.
give
Hook
us a
us up, folks.
dollar.
But there are some great comments. And Bonnie points out, for example, his dim-wit speech. He had a great sense of humor, and it's something I didn't know.
He has a great sense
I
of humor.
mean, I'd seen his sense of humor before, but it really came out last year during the Zoom call. That was amazing. And I'm really looking forward to tomorrow's talk. But yes, he mentioned casually in discussing the dim hypothesis, his analysis of culture through disintegration, integration, and misintegration, that if he is the man, the wit behind dim, then he must be the dim wit. It was very funny. And but Bonnie also says, was Fact and Value the official name of his Ford Hall Forum talk about dim? No, I don't think that it was.
No.
Incidentally, Bonnie, I did research that one talk and I could not find any information on it. I'm not done trying. I did skim through the dim hypothesis book, and I could not find it. I will keep working on it. One of our commenters, unsigned 32-bit individualist, says, I just dropped in. Can you start the show over again? And I happen to know something about this person behind this very clever and anonymous name, and I know he has that sense of humor. Scott says, no, Fact and Value was the polemic against Kelly. Well, we all know that. I have to say, since it came up, in the show notes that I've posted to Facebook, I have included links to some of my very favorite Leonard Peikoff resources that, again, used to be really expensive. I've included The Philosophy of Objectivism. I've included the speech, Why Should One Act on Principle?, given at the Ford Hall Forum. I've included a link to Certainty and Happiness, originally presented at a conference and then presented again at the Ford Hall Forum, which is great because you get two different Q&As with that one. Both of them are outstanding. I've included a link to My 30 Years with Ayn Rand.
Oh, so good.
An outstanding presentation. And since I included that, I included a link to this week's presentation by James Valiant, an analysis of My 30 Years with Ayn Rand. But here's the thing. I have included in my show notes a link to Leonard Peikoff's essay, Fact and Value. And for folks who associate that with the big rift with David Kelly and the Objective Atlas, whatever the institute was called back then, IOS something, stood for something. Institute for Objectivist Studies, I think it was. I don't know. They rebrand themselves every few years. For folks who associate that essay, Fact and Value, with that rift, I encourage you to follow the link I posted or just look it up and reread it. Because even apart from analyzing that rift and the question of whether you should support iOS or support ARI, whether you should condemn David Kelly for what he said or any of that, leave all that aside for a second. It's a brilliant essay.
Yep.
It's not only a brilliant essay, it's also one of the reasons why, and I said I would go back to this, why I really think the Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, including Leonard Peikoff's essay, is the answer to the problem of induction. And I don't say that just to give David Harriman a hard time. I do, in fact, have a copy of The Logical Leap.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that Leonard Peikoff has an introduction in the book, whereas, if you know the history of the book, it was essentially co-written with Leonard Peikoff. But either way, whatever. Point is, all those rifts aside, Fact and Value points me back to Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, which, again, I think is the answer. Ayn Rand's epistemology is the answer to the problem of induction. Even the Wikipedia explanation of it, where they talk about Leonard Peikoff on epistemology. Tell me if this makes sense to you. I thought it was pretty good for Wikipedia. Well, Jimmy Wales is an objectivist. I'm sure he hand wrote this one himself. Just kidding. In his book, The Logical Leap, Induction in Physics, which he co-wrote with physicist David Harriman. It's almost like a dig there, like Peikoff wrote the book and David Harriman was around, which he co-wrote with physicist David Harriman. Peikoff argues that there is no problem of induction because philosophy is itself an inductive science. And therefore, any attempt to deny the validity of induction contradicts itself by implicitly accepting the validity of induction. Peikoff and Harriman also argue that scientific claims verified by induction should be considered true. until new evidence warrants modifying or amending them, because scientific knowledge derived from induction is contextual. In other words, those who, on the basis of conclusive evidence, make inductive scientific claims regarding science cannot argue that their claims are subject to no possible modification, but can argue that they are the only rational claims that can be believed based on the available evidence. They conclude that the same process of induction is essential to every rational field, except mathematics, and that as a result, truth in any such field possesses the same objectivity as that of physics. I thought that was a good explanation. I have gone through the logical leap to find the answer to the problem of induction, and I don't think it's answered any better than that condensation in Wikipedia. Incidentally, for anybody who hasn't read it, if you wonder, why do they say except mathematics? Because mathematics has its own axioms. It's a little different kind of a science, at least until you get to Harry Binswanger. And how we know, because Harry Binswanger is rewriting mathematics to take all of the things that are not grounded in reality out, or reform them in ways that do ground them to reality, which to me is an extraordinary challenge. And I'm not sure if that project is even possible, but if you can replace concepts such as infinity with a grounded concept that still works in mathematics, well, that'll just be pretty damn awesome. So in any event, I do heartily recommend that Wikipedia article is surprisingly good.
Good.
I do recommend the book, which, as Wikipedia suggests, David Harriman's The Logical Leap was actually co-written with Leonard Peikoff. And again, that's my understanding of the history too. Either way, whatever. I don't mean to get into the rifts, but I love the fact that Fact and Value, if you can ignore all of that history behind it, it's such a damn good article just by itself.
Yep.
And it just makes you want to go out and live these ideas that much more. Live this stuff. So,
right. Yeah, thank you, Jeff Bannister, for
Jeff Bannister is up for $10. And good. I would have felt bad if we did the whole episode on this amazing time. And I know we've all been super chatting all week and throwing our money at ARC UK because of all the great content this week. But thank you, Jeff. I'm glad you had a few dollars left for our show as well, because my content might not be as great as James Valiant, who has met Leonard Peikoff and worked with him. And I've only met him a few times. But my heart's in the right place. And isn't that the standard?
No. Give till it hurts, as Ayn Rand once said.
Well, Leonard Peikoff has used that expression, but my heart was in the right place when he talks about rewriting the 76 lectures.
True.
And
that's right.
Of course, he's doing that tongue in cheek, so I can't resist doing the same. And Paul McKeever, who I happen to know is building a guitar. One of the most important philosophical things you can do in your life is build your own guitar. I haven't actually built one from scratch, but I've modified an awful lot of them. Says, hello, Robert and Amy, listening in while writing invoices. Are you talking about Dr. Kelly's Fact and Value response to Kelly? Yes and no. I'm talking about Fact and Value, but not as a response to David Kelly. Again, my point was just, it's a great article in and of itself. And if you can consider what he writes apart from all the controversy and the rift and all of that stuff, it really is an awfully good article.
Yeah, I don't know exactly. I'm just going to say this real quick and short. I don't know the state of objectivism and exactly how less powerful it would have been if all objectivists at that time and at that moment decided that tolerationism was going to be the new virtue and that everyone's going to follow that and live it.
You sound skeptical.
Oh, just positing a question.
It's a real question, because I do think there were some rifts that we would have all been better off without.
Right. I do too.
I have.
But yeah,
I won't even get into the details because we're celebrating Leonard Peikoff today.
Exactly.
You decide for yourself what you think about everything that happened in the last 15 years.
Yes, use your own judgment.
We'll have another episode where we'll get into our own pet peeves about, was this person or that person treated rightly? I mean, we did mention David Harriman and David Kelly, so it's kind of hard to avoid this topic.
Did you know Leonard Peikoff's birthday is tomorrow?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No. He's going to be 88.
Yes.
We talked on our last episode of 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir. No, that's me.
And Amy
you.
Nasir.
We talked about Bill Shatner,
Yeah.
William Shatner getting on spacecraft.
The Blue Origin, spacecraft.
And we talked about David Lee Roth retiring from music. And what we're talking about is older people who are still around.
Yeah.
It's been a tough few years. Because we were talking music, we lost David Bowie, we lost Prince, we lost Neil Peart. And it's great to see, like in David Lee Roth's case, he's retiring. Now, he's not dying, he's just retiring. And, Bill Shatner, William Shatner apparently is never going to retire. Kind of like Angela Lansbury, still working in her 90s, Dick Van Dyke, still working in his 90s. And I just love this, that we've got people who are getting older and are vital as all get out. And if you watched that Zoom call last year, or if you watched the operetta episode of Leonard Peikoff, he's turning 88 tomorrow, still kicking.
Yeah.
Love it. Love that. And, some of us are going to last longer than others, but it's just such a celebration of life to see that, unlike when I was young and, people over the age of 50 were sent to the home of the useless. Well, maybe not exactly like an anthem, but you get the idea. It's just great. And Jeff points out Clint Eastwood. There's another example, 90-year-old guy still doing whatever you think of his latest movie. He is still doing exactly what he wants to be doing. And that is life as an end in itself. Love it.
Yeah. And earlier this year, I think we all know that Leonard Peikoff came out and talked about operetta music. And that was
so good.
I mean, there are people who this came out, and at first it was like, let's have 50 people attend in the audience. And then I believe it was Lisa Van Dam had to secure a larger venue for this because more and more people kept wanting to be there, and they did. I don't know how many 100, 200, I don't know how many people showed up, but so amazing.
Too cool. I could go through more of my resources on Leonard Peikoff and the amazing things he's done and the impact that he's had on my life. I think that says most of it. We have every reason to be celebrating this man who turns 88 tomorrow. I had to be a small part of that here on the Ayn Rand Center UK channel, where, again, you can become a member at Ayn Rand. I was about to say AynRand.co.uk, AynRandCenter.co.uk. The man behind the scenes will post the link. Make sure you spell center with an R-E at the end, not an E-R, so that you go to the right place. Otherwise, I think it takes you to whitehouse.gov, which is probably a porn site again these days.
Or what was it called? Something Watch. It was
Attack Watch.
Attack Watch.
Does anybody remember Attack Watch?
Or there's something other like flag.gov.
Yeah, flag.gov. Email flag.gov to let Obama know when you've seen things that aren't true about the government. Is anything true about the government?
Oh, such fun.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So and had to be part of this.
Yeah.
Daniel says, make sure to spell it the wrong way. That's my line. I just can't resist saying it.
Yeah. Paul says his history of philosophy course, absolute must, in addition to OPAR. Yeah. And I believe
that's a tricky one because only the first part is available. So if I have any pull with you folks, not at the Ayn Rand Center UK, but at the Ayn Rand Institute, it's, could you please find, digitize, and release the second half of this? I mean, I'm spoiled with a wealth of stuff. And again, I've posted links on Facebook, on my profile. It's all public, links to my favorite Leonard Peikoff resources. But the one that is still impossible to find, and you can't buy it at the Ayn Rand bookstore, it's just not out there, is A History of Philosophy, Part 2. So Part 1, the ancient philosophers and leading up to Kant, it's out there. But if you want your Kant, Hegel, Schopenhauer, Marx, if you want the moderns, well, anyway, you know what to do. Let ARI know that Robert Nasir is not going to tolerate this because I don't believe in tolerance. We need that content. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your comments in the chat. What we're going to do now is we're going to go over to Clubhouse where you can talk back to us. Let us know your favorite things that Leonard Peikoff ever did for you. well, your favorite Leonard Peikoff resources that have had an impact on your life. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow on the Ayn Rand Center UK events, because this is not over yet. Thank you for letting us be a small part of it, and we will talk to you on the Clubhouse in uno momento.